So I beat Evenicle 2. I'm not even sure how to pronounce it. That's how I'm gonna say it, right? And I'm not really sure if I liked it or not. I like parts of it, but there's sections here and there that felt like it was padding and just became a slog. And while the gameplay is slightly harder than the first one, it was just done artificially. So the main character Alex, or Alec, I don't know, pretty much took Reach's role from the first one, which is like the healer and the black mage together. And Platina basically took what Aster was. And it's not a problem, it's kind of cool, since the main character is a physician with just some extremely high levels of luck and genetics. I'll talk about that later. Anyways, the role is kind of worse and better at the same time. Healing no longer uses BP or battle points. He now uses his own meter that grows up by leveling and maybe some events, but I don't think so. I think it was just coincidence of like, oh, I hit a level up during the chapter boss. And that's kind of cool because sometimes you just never use Riche for spells at all. It's like, I'd rather just have more BP for healing when I need it. So in this case, it's like, well, now you have free BP, just use whatever magic you want. And it's a good idea. On the other hand, exploring became a huge pain because your healing is severely limited. At one point in chapter 6, there was a gauntlet of mini boss fights, and I had to teleport back to town to heal up my healing meter every fucking time. Because like, yeah, maybe, you know, out of my 8 points, maybe I still have 3 or something. I was like, well, maybe I'm not gonna have enough for the boss, I'm just gonna waste time. Let me just teleport back. And then you have to slog through the random encounters again. And then when you're back, it's like maybe you only have 6 out of 8. It's like you're already having lower healing before. It's just annoying. So because of that, I feel like defense is a lot more important than attack at this point. Where because like, well, you have more defense, you're taking less damage, you need less healing. So therefore your meter goes for longer. And that's kind of annoying because I think they even trying to do it because there's like some items and some gal monster things you equip, and it's like, oh, here's plus 50 attack or here's 100 attack out of your like 2000 attack that I have or something. I like have like 2400 something, right? And I'm like, why would I need that? Give me something better. So even something with like, oh, plus 80 defense, I would take that instead because everybody only had like 500 defense at the end anyway. So at that point, it's like, that's a much higher incremental than anything else. So what the fuck's with the attack? I think most people would go like, oh, give me more critical or give me more stun. And those are the two more important ones. So yeah, it's like the game, I feel like it focuses a lot more on higher stats than actual strategy at this point. Felt like I was always under leveled, but I always beat the chapter, so it was fine. I generally won with at least 1 healing left. I feel like an easy way to fix it was to buff up his spells later on. So let's say it's like, oh, first you only have heal for 50%, and then you have AoE heal for 35% for everybody. Eventually you have 100% heal and a 50% AoE heal, right? And a revive and all that. But after those, I feel like maybe it's like, oh, your first 2 healings would be upgraded. So it's like, oh, healing 1 with only 1 bar will now heal like 60%. And healing AoE in the basic will cost 2 bars, will now heal like 50%. So the longer you go in the chapters, the better your healing gets. So even though the RNG and the random counters gets really annoying, then the damage gets really fucking high, while your new healing offsets it, and it's like, it's not the case. You have very limited healing. You have like 10 bars max, and for the most part I think you're gonna have like maybe 7 or 8 by the end of the last chapter, unless you grind. And I feel like they're trying to make you grind the whole way through. And I think there's only one move that's not healing that uses that bar, which is the 100% stun guaranteed, and that is like, the cost is so high that I never see a use for it, aside from like 2 mega bosses that I fought where it's like, hey, because he does so much fucking damage, healing didn't matter at all. It was like, let's just keep him stunned so I can do some damage and win. I feel like the final boss was somewhat overtuned. I beat the 4 walls at either like 61 or 62, and then I just got curb stomped the first time I actually fought the final boss. And that's because of mechanics, and the second time was a lot easier, but I still lost because I lost by attrition, right? Because my damage was too low, and since I was getting hit a lot, because my speed is also low because due to levels, right? I eventually just lost because I couldn't heal anymore. Because normally, you know, healing is part of strategy, you know, oh, defense buffs, healing, okay, now speed buffs. This one's like a lot less on how it works. And that's basically how I beat things, because sometimes it just makes the whole experience more enjoyable. Like I remember fighting Nyx from Persona 3 with like a level 43 team, while other guys I know were in their 70s since they like grinding a lot. Anyways, I was forced to leave. I grinded like 70, I got 10 extra speed, which is a pretty substantial boost, alongside maybe like 400 extra attack, and I won without much trouble outside of like lucky shots where they get like 2 turns back to back, and because of that, it's like sometimes the first turn they'll get like a crit chance, and because they have a crit chance, like they're like, oh, let's do our AoE attack. And then with the AoE attack, they'll do like 4,000, 5,000 damage, and I'll just lose outright. So I feel like they're trying to make you grind a lot, and the way they do it is to make you always fucking poor. So the price of equipment is really high. So what you do is, or you get out of town and you do a couple runs and you get enough money to get the new equipment. And with that, it's like, well, now I also forced you to also level up like 1 or 2 times. A lot of times I didn't even do that. I just went up, fight the boss with the lower equipment. Like, fuck it, I don't care. So sometimes I would have a lot of money, like, oh, I'm fucking rich. And then the next town, the next chapter, again, I lost all my money again. I didn't have to grind because I saved it all for the last one, but it was still like, damn, dude, I had like 400,000 and I'm back to like a couple Ks. This is stupid. Your equipment can also drop from fighting monsters, but it's never going to be an upgrade. It's like, you won't have like, oh, here's level 70 and it won't drop a level 80. It'll drop a level 70 that's refined +1 and that's it. And eventually by the end game, yeah, you're going to need those things. I don't know how far they go. I only got a +4 at the maximum. Maybe probably +5 is the maximum, but who knows? Maybe it's +10, and because some of these mech bosses are really hard, and I just ignored like half of them because it's like, oh, well, it feels like they have a million HP, so it's fuck it. They don't really do anything really, aside from like, you're gonna get maybe like an extra 50 lines of subtext. And eventually, I think by level 40 or 50, your defense stat increases are very minimal, to the point where getting better loot with the higher refinement of your armor is way more impressive than any extra attack you get. And even like, oh, here, like I said, the items where, oh, +100 attack is, fuck that, that's useless. The +80 defense is great. That's like, what, 20% increase on your normal defense? It's crazy, it's great. But there's also other times where, like, oh, I got a +4 wand for Alex. And then it gave me like, oh, here's +250 attack, and I was weird, like, does Alex even use attack? Because he uses a magic attack. It was a worthless stat. It was pretty funny, honestly. So I had fun in chapter 1 and 2. I think Kano is probably my favorite character in the game, though I liked a couple other ones later on, like Charlotte and Amelia, right? Yuragi is honestly kind of annoying, and it's kind of a piece of shit in certain like optional scenes where she'll force her like ideals and ideas into the rest of the group. It's like, oh, I don't think that's cool, and she'll just like guilt trip you the whole time. But if it's something that she wants that's also conflicting with her ideals, she'll just word it around differently. It's like, no, it's fine. But and there's one specific scene that's really annoying to me. I don't know why it annoyed me that much, but it's like, oh, I beat this mega boss. I think it was like a elephant or something, and it dropped these tusks, and these tusks were like, I forgot, it's 400,000 per, or like 4 million per, right? She's like, no, we should bury them. And Kano's like, our fucking side of the country is so fucking poor. This could help us a lot. It's like, and she just stares at you the whole time. It's like, no, you bury them. That's the right thing to do. It's like, no, you're fucking up our side of the country, stupid. And then they all just give up. It's like, no, Yuragi's like, no, Yuragi's not right. Yuragi's a piece of shit. You already killed the thing because it just fell off the mountain. That was funny, but it's like, fuck it, it's already dead. Just use it. So you have all these side wives afterwards, right? And Geppetto is the one that gets screwed up the most. Like, she's a half poppin', like Erimo from Evenicle 1. She's rarely seen, and I think she gets like only one scene in the whole damn game, and then one extra one with Brownie, which is the full poppin', right? Brownie shows up a lot in every chapter, and she makes Geppetto's screen time even shorter than it actually is. I might have not cared as much if they're always both together, but they're not. And it's like, why did you put Geppetto around? It was useless. And I feel like the Poppins got really silent compared to the first one, but also the Kalars got a lot more screen time in this one compared to the first one anyway. So it's like, oh, maybe it's a trade-off. All right, fine. Like, all in all, a lot of the wives feel more sidelined than they were in Evenicle 1, and that kind of sucks. But the Saints get a lot more screen time. So again, it's another kind of trade-off. I rather have more time with the side wives, but whatever. I think part of it is because there's a lot more small chatting around the 4 main wives that counteract the events. But that's only for them. The other ones get nothing. I think Bonnie and Brownie are probably my favorite ones in that group. The new system of getting points for the interaction events is from healing any disease that Alex's wives get, right? And you heal them from finding ingredients on the field, and you're basically forced to heal them since they're generally fucked over at some point. Like, oh, this one always poisoned. Oh, this one has lower speed. This one has lower accuracy. And it's like, oh, fuck. So she's always missing. And some do like, oh, now you do 0 damage. And because of this, you'll notice the padding happening at like chapter 3 onwards. Though the worst part is in chapter 4, because in chapter 4 it's like 3 times the size of anything else inside the game. So when you have like, oh, this ingredient is in the autumn area. It's like, the autumn area is so fucking huge. So you go around the whole thing, and that takes like 10 minutes, and you're fighting random encounters the whole time, and you find the ingredients, like, okay, now let's go back to the hospice and heal you. Oh, 2 minutes later, you got a new disease. Oh, find it in the autumn area again, so it's so damn large. What is this? Chapter 3's padding was more like backtracking anything else. It's like, oh, let's go to the Dark City. Let's go to this volcano. Oh, I need this piece. That's over there. Okay, now go back here. Oh, now I need a new piece. Now go back again. And I don't think I needed healing, but let's say you're more under level than I was, then oh, now you have to teleport back to town. Now that's more backtracking. It was just annoying. Another weird thing, and it's weird to complain about, but the evil hscenes are nowhere near as bad as the first one, and it's to the point where it's like, why even add them? It's nowhere near as bad with the subtext as the first one, because the first one was like, oh, you got like all these guys fucking did it, and then out of nowhere you got a black ring, and now you're fucked over for life. And this one is like, oh no, if you have a skill, yeah, you still got assaulted, but overall it doesn't break your life like the first one did. There's no revived girl that fucks her dad. There's no like, oh, lady in the prison and then the monster's like, oh, I'm now full, so now I'm gonna just do that to you. And that was also fucked up. All these weird like the tentacle, what's the tentacle thing? I forgot which one it was with the blonde one in the end. But it was also, oh yeah, it was like a tentacle thing that tried to impregnate the blonde one, and she got fucked over too. And this one's like, oh, it's a little baby. Or the one later on where it's the Hanny's trying to do it. It's like, what the fuck is this shit? She already got fucked over enough. Can you just leave her alone? And this one is like almost is very, it's over there. It's still bad, but nowhere near as bad in context. I'd rather just not have them around, I guess. So for the genetics things that I mentioned before, it was probably one of the few cool things in the VN where his mom is a clone, right? And the clone was part of the group that was shunned underground because they had all these black rings, because they were like, oh, they were from the barbaric era, right? So I forgot his name, but the High Knight and the High Saint went inside to get some horrors data, which it's stuff that you'll learn if you go through the VN, but the whole gist of it is like, well, the High Saint got contaminated by Adam or Aiden, whatever it is. And because the whole, well, I think it was the Holy Knight. The Holy Knight's a piece of shit. So the whole thing's the High Saint got annoyed. It's like, okay, I'm now the new breeding ground, right? And because, well, she was the new breeding ground, but she had all these high powers with it. So, but because she did it with so many people, she got the black ring, because you can only go with, which doesn't really make much sense, because apparently you're not supposed to get the black ring if you have skills, and I assume she does. So I don't know how that works, but whatever. And she doesn't like the black ring, right? So she kept eating her finger, and the finger gets regenerated from the Aiden's blood thing, and she just kept on eating it because the ring kept showing up. And it's to the point, well, now the ring didn't show up anymore, it's just part of her blood. So it's like the black ring itself is a source of power inside her, so all her offspring also has some kind of crap like that. So the clone also has so Alex also has it. And that explains why Alex never gets any of these diseases, because he keeps using spells and skills and all that. Because otherwise, yeah, he wouldn't die, but he would have these diseases because Evenicle would you just have to find the ingredients to heal himself. And the last thing is that in some way I'd prefer if Aster had a larger role in this one, because the premise they left off with in the Evenicle 1 was pretty interesting, where Aster doesn't really have a moral compass, but just follows the world's rule set. So he can theoretically be a dictator in a different world. He could just be Rance as long as the rule supports it. Instead, he's just in the ending and it doesn't really matter, and you have this physician for the whole thing. While the outcome is different, it's like, okay, in this case, he's not going to different worlds. Everybody can go to his world to get healed, but otherwise he doesn't care. And that's pretty cool. It's like, oh, you're not doing the same thing over and over. But I still just prefer to have Aster as like, oh, out of nowhere, he wasn't one of the main villains. Or in Evenicle 3 shows up, it's like, oh shit, he was actually a mastermind behind something. And that's a lot more I can say about him than I could say about this Alex guy, where at the most he'd be like a cameo, but like exactly how QD is. It's just, oh, he's here, he's a MacGuffin, but he's not going to be an actual story point. The ending video was also kind of funny considering they missed a couple of characters from what I can tell. I had to watch it twice and I still couldn't find them. I don't know, maybe in the background I couldn't see them. Overall, I think Evenicle 2 was neat, but I didn't have as much fun as I expected. But on the other hand, maybe I'll just have fonder memories in a year after I forgot all the bad sections. I think another issue is that this is my third gameplay VN. I might just be burnt out by them. And especially because I just played Castle Meister, right? And that was such a better game. It was a much more fun experience. So it might be counteracting from that as well. I'm giving this like a 6.5 because I felt like it was constantly teetering from these two scores.